So there's one girl, about 12-year-old, who with dyslexia, quite severe dyslexia, and her self-confidence was almost zero. She can't learn anything. And she was convinced that she was dumb. So we started with a memory palace. We were doing it for all of them, where we did all of history, and the teacher had put posts right round. And we started walking it, and it just worked for her. One thing the kids want to put in is the first flushing toilet. We were putting in, as adults, world wars and all this. The kids put in the first flushing toilet and the first football match, and when certain Batman first invented, all sorts, and they were acting it out. And it was just working a treat for us. So we put her in charge of the memory palace. And what happened was everything else moved up because she started using it for other things.
Teil 4 des Rethinking Memory Memory Café Interviews mit Dr. Lynne Kelly.
I cannot leave this house. My entire landscape's alive. I'm not moving, ever.
That's so interesting. I'm just astonished. That quote from Augustine is really beautiful. Also, the way you read it, it's really touches my heart. And it's kind of like also my experience when you've worked with memory palaces and everything, it resonates with you very much.
Yes. And to think somebody like him was experiencing the same thing with their memory that we are. It's because the human brain has evolved. We have all got the Aboriginal people, the Native American, the ancient Greeks, we're all using exactly the same memory. And that's why when I read that quote and said, that's what it's like for me too, it was a bit astonishing because, what's happening in our brains is the same. And the neuroscience explains why place and music are so essential to memory.
And there was what's the name of the neuroscience scientist again that you worked with?
Jenny Roger at the University of Western Australia. So I do a tutorial with her first year neuroscience students where she's taught the neuroscience of plasticity and the hippocampus and all that. And I come in and talk the Aboriginal ones, and it just all matches. They are doing, which is no surprise. I mean, what's worked kept going, what didn't work didn't. So what the brain, the same with the ancient Greeks, what worked they kept, which was memory palaces and characters. We must get on to characters.
Oh yeah, we will. But we have to, I really have to get in touch with Dr. Rogers as well and do an interview with her to get on the brain science side of things. That would be really interesting also.
Jenny Roger, yes, Rodger.
Oh, Roger, okay.
I'll introduce you to her by email.
Oh, that would be really nice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
And she's her thing is brain plasticity and showing that what I couldn't believe when I first got onto that stuff was that every new idea, every new memory that's radical and a surprise, not boring stuff you see all the time, lays down a physical neural pathway in your brain physically. And then it will disappear again because they're very, very fine. But every time you repeat that information, you are reinforcing that neural pathway. So those memory palaces are physically in our brains. I still find that absolutely astounding. And that's why getting old, what happens is people stop learning. Now, some dementia, that is a physical disease. But how much of it is that we stop using that muscle? Exactly. Because we know that you can keep laying down neural pathways all your life. So building up your memory palaces and songs and all the other memory devices by layering and building and building and building them, new palaces, more complexity into those palaces, you will keep your memory working actively way, way longer. And the research tends to indicate you may not avoid dementia. There's not enough research yet. But there's fairly clear research that you will delay it, if not avoid it completely. And there's research happening with elderly people and memory palaces.
Yeah, that's such an interesting topic. I've actually read a book about I think it was a neuroscientist, or was it a biologist? I don't know. It's called Fixing My Gaze. And as you can see, I'm kind of squint-eyed. So for the German speakers is ich schiele nach innen. My right eye turns inwards. And you hadn't noticed? Okay, thank you. My wife also tells me, because that's a big insecurity in my life as well. And my wife always tells me, I've never noticed that. And I was like, it's really nice of you.
Where did I have trouble noticing? Anyway, keep going.
Okay. So, well, if I take off my glasses and I look with the right eye, you can see that my left one is turning in. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the problem. I can't coordinate both eyes at the same time. That's also why I don't have 3D vision like other people do. Like, I don't know what 3D looks like. And this lady, Susan R. Berry was her name, wrote this book. It's called Fixing My Gaze. And what she found was, it was really interesting, because the doctors would tell me, you can't, if you've not learned to coordinate your eyes together in like the first 3 years or so of your age, you will never learn it. And what she did with the help of optometrists, certain optometrists, and through also the new neuroscience, which, like you said, tells us that neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to form new neural connections, prevails till old age, till you die, exactly.
Yeah.
With that knowledge, she tried to fix her squint-eyedness. I don't know if that's even the word. And she actually did. And she describes in that book that the first time she saw in 3D was so shocking for her. She couldn't leave the house because it was snowing. And she would see the depth, the snowflakes. She would see the 3D layering of them. And she just couldn't handle it, let alone being in a crowd of people. So it's really a beautiful thing as well, not only for memory, right, for memory projects, but also fixing such a big hurdle and hindrance and insecurity for people like me, is also possible.
Well, let's get rid of the myth that our brains automatically decay as we get old.
Exactly.
Like every muscle, you got to use it and exercise it, not just use it for ordinary day. You've got to physically exercise it. Yes. And memory palaces and memory systems are the way to do exercise. It's good fun.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about the benefits of using mnemonics for these projects, like for your learning project, you said? What else did you learn through using them? Like you said, history, you can put things into relation. What else did you find that you learned?
I'm not sure exactly what you're after.
Okay.
One of the big things I learned was the more characters you add to information, the more memorable it becomes, because humans like stories, and we like stories with people or at least animals or something alive in them. So if I can go back, because I've got some characters sitting here waiting to be included in the interview, if I can go back to French, and would be the same if learning German, is that I couldn't remember genders, because in English our nouns are not gendered. So this is fleur and this is petit prof. And petit prof is masculine and fleur with her flowers. Where are your flowers, Fleur? Is feminine. So if I want to learn a noun in French, I just associate with either petit prof or fleur. So he will sit on a wall, for example, and I'm just trying, she drives cars. Yeah. So I've got the genders just by adding these characters. Now, we tried this at a primary school, and the vocab that week they did just by adding the bears. The kids all got every single one of the genders right. Wow. Because I played with them, and they're so different that those associations worked. Mathematical tables. This is Sebastian. Sebastian, he's very good at expressions. He's got magnets, so he sort of worries about
that's
things.
Cool.
He's gorgeous. So Sebastian does mathematical tables with Rapscali, but he's not here. It's a long story why. So the maths tables are almost impossible to remember, and people learn them in order. One is 1, 3 4s, 12, 4 4s, 16. You'll know the rhythm, but when you want to do a maths table, as a senior maths teacher, I can tell you I do not want people working their way all the way through them. They have to be known individually. So Sebastian and Rapscali act out them. So what we did was got the students in art, and art and music should be in the heart of every curriculum and used for everything else, not on the peripherals to be done on a Friday afternoon. And if we need the kids for anything else, we take them out of art and music. So the kids in art drew them. So for 6 8s are 48, which is the one in the book. Oh, so Bass, he's got his picture in the book. You've seen him. They act out. So 6 is always sticks, 8 is always gate, 40 is always naughty. So they had to create a story where connecting. So they've got Bass and Rapscali. I'll tell you why he's Rapscali in a moment. Picking up sticks. They go and rest on a gate, and the gate's a naughty gate and knocks Scully flying, and his sticks go everywhere. So the students drew that picture. So if ever they need 6 and 8, they go skate, naughty gate.
Oh, cool.
It'll come quickly. They only do those images for the tables they don't know. They don't do all of them. So we pre-test them and do them. And it worked really well. The art teacher was able to do some of the art curriculum with them, and they built up these books. If they forgot a table, they go back to their books. So that worked really well. Now, we couldn't call these characters ancestors. They're based on Indigenous ancestors, or the Pueblo call them Kachina. Any use of that would be inconsiderate misappropriation of culture. So Paul Allen, the art teacher, and I tried to come up with a name. So we decided to call them Cheekies. We then Googled Cheekies and got a lot of images of bottoms. So that had... So Paul came up with Rapscallions, and in English, Rapscallions, they're cheeky little creatures. And it's very cute seeing a 7-year-old without teeth going Rapscallions. So the students made them in craft, in art. They actually made characters, and then they got their characters to talk to each other. So when they did persuasive text, for example, where you've got to write an essay that argues a case, we would get somebody else's Rapscallion, put it in front of them and say, that Rapscallion disagrees with you, says you're talking rubbish. All their essays, when they redid them, became much, much stronger just by having a character sitting on the table that they had to argue with. That simple change. So in physics, in science, they were doing force. So they all did force and did experiments and things. And a week later, this is a primary school that goes from prep to 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds. But force goes right across the curriculum. So a week later, I said to every student individually, do you remember doing force in science? So that put into context. Yes. What is a force? 3 out of 70 told me it was a push or a pull. The rest told me it's when your parents make you do something you don't want to do. Or half of them said to me, may the force be with you, which is wonderful for advertising for Star Wars and appalling physics. So the music teacher, Joseph Bromley, so here we are, why music's in it, created a little song using the Imperial March from Star Wars. Force is a push or a pull. You can't do it without the actions. Force is a push or a pull. I won't sing it for your sake. And they all did that in music and then did it again in assembly, then nothing for a week. A week later, I used exactly the same questioning and I got 70 out of 70 said a force is a push or a pull, did the actions and laughed. And that laugh told me a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not saying sing everything, but sing definitions, sing fundamentals, do art for the fundamentals. And then you're back to the old idea that I've keep going on and on about you've grounded your information and you can layer higher levels on top of it.
That's so fascinating. So, but there are still
Very
people.
happy.
What's that? Sorry?
My bears were very happy that they got to appear.
There are still people out there, they are a little skeptical. You know, they say, you know, mnemonics do not work for me. I'm just not a visual person. I can't imagine anything. Like, I get this all the time. What would you say?
I've just discovered since I wrote Memory Craft that I have aphantasia. I don't have any visual images. I gather other people actually see things. Imagine an apple lake, and I've always assumed that that was a metaphor. So I have no visual memory. I just didn't know other people did. But I still have the concept of these images. I probably use stories more, characters more than people who can create these images. When I saw, what's it called, Memory Games on Netflix, the documentary on memory champions, I didn't realise that all those flashy things, I thought that was just, you know, creative film work. I didn't realise that's what people have happening in their heads. So no, I have no ability to visualise. It still works. Your brain, so when I read all these things about creating images, I always assumed that that was sort of, you know, I've got some fuzzy thing in the background somewhere, but I can't see it. There's no colour, there's no definition. It still works. And as for creating stories and imaginative things, I have yet, when I've done umpteen workshops, I have yet to have anyone who, once they start and relax, won't start doing it. So some of the students use Pokemon, some of the adults use film characters as their rapscallions, or be very careful not to use members of the family because some of the combinations that you get unexpectedly will include violence or something sexual. And I originally had my granddaughters in it. They got moved out. So, and use characters that are not all nice, good people we admire. I mean, shove in bad people and horrible people. And then some of my characters have morphed. Like I started with Homer, as in the Greek. He's now Homer Simpson. Because I could do more with Homer Simpson because I had Homer and Socrates and Aristotle. I had all these people hanging around in togas. So I had to change them. You just will. It will happen. Your brain will do it. The moment you add characters, the moment you add stories, and the moment you add humour and emotion, it'll work.
Oh, that's so great.
And I have yet to meet anyone who it doesn't once they relax.
I think so too. Relaxing is a really important part in the whole process. Like I've seen that with my students. I work in a learning center where college dropouts can do their college degree, finish the college degree. And one huge problem there is that lots of them have really low self-confidence in terms of, you know, they think they're just not making it. They're just too stupid for whatever, you know. They just preach to themselves all the time like that, and then they believe it.
Their self-talk will convince them.
Yes, totally. And so what I found is I've actually got this encounter with a young student there. I used to teach them mnemonics, the memory palace and everything, and they just refused to do it. They said, you know, I can't do this. So we had this retreat, and we were in a little hut in the mountains, and we were sitting there at 10 o'clock in the evening and we're just relaxing in front of a bonfire. And he said, you know, he brought it up again. And he said, you know, I can't do it. And I said, you know, we'll just use the hut and we'll just memorize. And I pulled out my phone and I looked up all the different, not countries, but do you say districts of Germany? You know, Berlin and stuff like that, like Baden-Württemberg or what else? No, I can't remember. But, like the different districts of Germany, we memorized, and he could just do it with ease. So, and I patted him on the shoulder, and I said, you know, you can do it. You just don't realize, like you don't trust yourself. Trust yourself, you can do it, and you'll do marvelous in school.
I've had the same experience with both the primary and the secondary school. In both cases, they had grants in order to bring me in to do memory techniques. So there's one girl, about 12-year-old, who with dyslexia, quite severe dyslexia, and her self-confidence was almost zero. She can't learn anything. And she was convinced that she was dumb. So we started with a memory palace. We were doing it for all of them, where we did all of history, and the teacher had put posts right round. And we started walking it, and it just worked for her. One thing the kids want to put in is the first flushing toilet. We were putting in, as adults, world wars and all this. The kids put in the first flushing toilet and the first football match, and when certain Batman first invented, all sorts, and they were acting it out. And it was just working a treat for us. So we put her in charge of the memory palace. And what happened was everything else moved up because she started using it for other things. So not only her confidence, but because she was getting the words before she was reading them, she knew what words she was going to expect. And by using a Lacasa and using the memory palace, so her confidence built up, and the words, they still looked mixed up and her spelling wasn't great, but she knew what she was doing because she had ways of getting the language other than from reading. There's a little boy that from another school was very traumatized. His background was horrible, and he couldn't read at grade 2 at all, and was difficult. But the principal of the school suspected something else, but he always had a toy with him, a rapscallion called Bob. And the principal one day said to him, "Can Bob read?" "Oh yeah, Bob can read." And Bob started reading everything.
What?
We found this with a few students that seem to have learning difficulties, that their rapscallions can do it. And we think it's to do with they don't want to make mistakes. But a rapscallion can make mistakes. That doesn't matter. And it turned out that he could read very well. I had the same thing at secondary level. Again, a student that didn't want to do things. We used different methods. But again, the memory stuff, in his case, it was manipulating a pack of cards. His confidence soared. And it was because he was allowed to make mistakes because it was no longer him. I'm not sure what's going on, but I've had it a few times. So these memory, because it's a different way of learning, it just seemed to make all the difference.
That's so interesting. Wow. Coming back to the critics, the transition kind of hurts. Coming back to, because it's so encouraging for me, listening to like all these young children where you can kind of feel their hurt and their pain, and you're like with them, especially if you if you work like me in a learning center where you work with college dropouts and their histories and their backgrounds. And man, I'm a social worker by profession, and so I know a lot of this. And it really is so encouraging for me to hear you ravel and just be excited about what is possible through those easy to learn techniques. So it kind of hurts me when I must come back to that topic, but I think it's very important also. So some critics would say the memory palace is too much work. You need to put in more work, right, to get something out of it. Like, why would I want to use it? Why would I not just stick to my old learning techniques that work?
Because you've got to learn more to learn it.
Yeah.
Because you have to put it down to whether it's time and effort. The amount of time and effort, if you use a memory palace, is significantly less than if you don't. And the efficiency and effectiveness is also much higher. But with the students that are doubtful about it, one thing we did is use the Lacasa. So we didn't say this is a memory device, the way we're going to do it. We said, hey, what we're going to do today is put sticks and beads on, matching. Now, we actually did a Shakespeare play. So which bead, let's take A Midsummer's Night's Dream. We were actually doing necklaces, not La Casa, but the same thing. Okay, bottom is one of the characters. Which bead best represents a bottom? And that we have all these different ones, because I've raided so many opportunity shops and charity shops and got old necklaces. And they'll take the time to choose which one represents bottom. And that alone has got that character in there. You know, which one's the fairy queen? Oh, it's got to be the pink one, you know. So we weren't saying we're creating a memory device for Midsummer's Night's Dream.
Mm-hmm.
We just started doing it. And by the time they worked out that it was a memory device, it was already working. And they were amazed. They could go, oh, there's bottom, there's the fairy queen, there's, you know. So that experience told them that this was going to work. Then we explained what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had other people doing these just to test that it's not me, it's the method, you know. And it certainly is, it's not me. So that just works. But I'm learning now not to explain the method till we've already had some experience of it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, does a person miss out on who sticks to standard learning techniques as opposed to mnemonics?
Fun. You're spending every time. So I've got a new word to learn in Chinese, and I've got the memory device to do it. So shenme, which is what? I have to imagine, because of my system, a shrew engaging Medusa, engraving Medusa, and I've got a particular house I've got to remember it at. So instead of just going shenme what, I'm going, what the earth is that shrew doing? Oh, it's doing an engraving of Medusa. What the hell is going on here? It's funny. It's stupid. The stupider it is, the more but every time I want what, not anymore, because eventually it just is, Shenma's just there now. But every time I wanted what before I remembered, all I had to go was what? The shrew engraving Medusa. The thing is, I've watched kids in class doing this, especially with their maths tables.
Mm-hmm.
Bass just want to appear again, Sebastian. They'll be sitting there doing, and they'll start laughing because their stories have come back and their characters have come back. So there is an element of fun in it that isn't in rote learning. And this is not rote learning. Rote learning is repeating without understanding. And then you can build so much understanding into it and see so many patterns. Your brain can't stop it, and there's novelty, so it's being laid down and remembered. I could not do Chinese without my memory palaces and I'm using a bestiary. Again, I'm using the bestiary. So that's why Shenme, I did shrew and engraving, because that's from my bestiary. SH is a shrew, EN is an engraver, and ME is Medusa. So I'm using that bestiary to put together those words and get those characters. And it's just fun. And then I sit in front of TV drawing them because it amuses me.
That's great. What advice would you give our listeners who are still maybe a little hesitant with trying out mnemonics?
Why are you hesitant? What happens is in your head. Nobody else knows. I carefully chose that story to not be one that I'm not going to tell you about. Try it, really, for the sake of your brain. If you exercise your body and don't exercise your brain seriously, as in more than just daily thinking, but really putting some effort into laying down those neural pathways, there is a chance you will get old with a healthy body and your brain go. It has to be exercised, and I tell you what, for me it's more fun than anything else. But my memory palaces, that's one of the reasons I spread them right out, is that's my daily walks. So, daily walking my Chinese palace, which is 5 kilometres, as a brisk walk, I'm doing it. So I incorporate this in every day. I always cook in French. I sing in the shower, but I'm not singing pop songs. I'm singing whatever song. I might be singing Africa, the countries of Africa, or my birds or whatever. I'm always memorizing when I'm walking and making up funny stories. That encourages me to walk because I don't get bored. So I always do a good few kilometres each day. So you can incorporate it in the day without adding extra time. I do some extra time because I do the training for the memory competitions. But you don't need to add extra time. I have a lot of little books. That's just one of with whatever I'm memorizing. But mostly I use littler ones, which I haven't got here, but little ones that I can put in my pocket or bits of paper for what I want to memorize on that particular walk. And that's fun, or creating a new memory palace. It's just fun, and I'm not adding any more time to my day.
And when reviewing, do you set aside time for review as well?
Well, some of those walks will be reviewing. It won't always be new knowledge. It'll be reviewing as well. But a lot of it sort of gets reviewed anyway. So when I cook, I'm reviewing. And when I cook and the recipes are in French, the recipes say things like, put this back in the cupboard, make sure that you cook on the stove. It's not just the ingredients. So I add all of that stuff in. Plus, I use the videos on online, the children's ones, Chinese and French. I try to talk to my granddaughter in French. She's learning French at school. She's ahead of me, but I try. It's just part of every day. You will find that it fits in without adding any more. So I do think ahead what I'm going to do when I shower, when I cook. Gardening, I always take out a bit of paper, and I only add 1 or 2 things a day, but you're amazed how quickly it'll build up.
It's so cool. Can you tell us, we'll be almost finished. Can you tell us a little bit more about your personal experience with forgetfulness as opposed, like when you memorize with normal, like rote learning, reviewing it over and over and over again, as opposed to your memory techniques. If you compare the forgetfulness, what do you find? It's hard to quantify, right?
Learning, I can guarantee forgetfulness because I won't remember it. My husband says there's no point in even taking me anywhere on a holiday because I'll have forgotten it. Within a year, he'll say, do you remember going? No. My memory is that bad. If I've put in a memory palace and not revised it for a few months, then it will have gone a bit, but it'll come back very fast. Whereas if I'd used rote learning, it'd be gone and I'd have to start again.
Yes.
But because I walk my palaces and play around with all these things, because I'm putting in practical knowledge, like the birds when we go birding, except we're in coronavirus lockdown, so haven't been birding for a few months. That's reinforcing it all. But I do have my ceremonial cycle, which I have encoded to this wooden ball, which is based on the Scottish Neolithic carved stone balls. I do check it through and check that I've done each song. So I do have a cycle, but that's because I'm doing so much of this stuff. So I have a reviewing system set up, but it comes back easily if you use the memory techniques. If you're using rote learning, you go back to the beginning.
Yeah, that's exactly my experience as well. I think I've not reviewed my Bible memory palace, like the entire thing, for like 2 years or something. But I still, like, if people ask me, I do this all the time if I do memory training with little Christian groups or whatever, I let them probe myself, and say, just tell me a chapter in the book and I'll tell you what's in there. And most of the time it works really well, even though I didn't review it for 2 years, which is insane for me. It's really interesting. And I've also got the experience of another student participating in one of my workshops, and 1 year and then 2 years after attending the same workshop, and it just happened that I used the same example there, and she was so astounded because she said it's just insane that I used to learn something with you there 2 years ago. I never reviewed it, and I just know it 2 years after, which kind of
I've done 1,000 digits of pi just because, I had to try everything out, and using Memory Palace and Dominic's system and POA, person, action, object, and I hadn't done it probably for 18 months. And I got some mixed up. I had the image but couldn't quite get it firm enough. But it only took one review picking up that, and it was all back. And it is astounding. It's in there somewhere, and the neuroscience will tell you that. It's in there somewhere, but without the cue, without the hook, you can't get it back. And that's what memory palaces are. They are actually the hooks to recall information. So if you now give me a particular location on the Pi memory palace, I'll get it back straight away. Or any group of numbers. I can go on from there or back from there, backwards or forwards is no different. So it's all in there. The hooks, the memory palace provide a hook to ensure that you've got a cue to get it back again.
Thank you very much, Lynne, for this second interview. And time just flies by. It's been another hour. Oh, it's so cool. Tell us again once more, where can listeners find you, and how can they buy your fascinating book, Memory Craft, which is a really practical one, like we heard already?
They can find me at my website. If you Google LYNNE KELLY, there's either the American author or me. Or lynnekelly.com.au, AU for Australia, or any of the bookshops have the memory code and Memory Craft, so Amazon, Book Depository, but any of the online bookshops, and all real bookshops can get them too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been fun.